Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I call the Village of Rhinebeck Planning Board meeting for June 4, 2024 to order. First item on the agenda is a public hearing for Northwoods Holding 20 Garden Street. The applicant is not ready to have the public hearing on that. An item has been pulled from the agenda. If anyone's here for the public hearing, we're sorry about that, but they will be re-notified when the applicant is ready for the public hearing. So we're going to move on to item 2 under old business, and that's 6 Mulberry Street. And you requested an opportunity to make a presentation to the board.
Oh, yeah, sure. Good evening, Victoria Polidoro, here with David Rupp.
David Rupp, yeah.
So we submitted the application for partial demolition of the building, and David's going to walk you through it.
Yeah, I hope that you all received, I printed out 6 copies for the planning board, bound copies, and that there's more information in there than I'm going to focus on today, although I'm happy to answer any questions that is in that presentation. But my understanding is the focus really is on the partial demolition today, and the arguments or the sort of reasoning for it. On the DD001 shows the plans of the existing building, drawings 1, 2, and 3.
That's the letter.
In the grayed areas are the proposed areas for demolition. I think the easy sort of low-hanging fruit, so to speak, would be on all the drawings on the north side of the building. There's 3 stories: a substructure or basement structure, ground floor, and second floor, which we refer to in the presentation and going forward as the annex. That annex was built. Well, we don't know exactly when it was built. Its earliest recording from a photo is late 50s, I believe. It is built, correct, the right side shaded. It's built from a cinder block, CMU, and has been painted red in an effort to sort of blend it, stuff you guys already know. The hallway that is the main sort of axis, north-south axis of the Bulkley Schoolhouse, the original structure, the wall, the demising wall was opened to create a connection between the two, as well as an additional stair. All of that area is, again, proposed for demolition, reasoning both being excess area that we do not need or cannot accommodate for the proposed use of the project. Also, it destabilizes, I think, what is the original intent, symmetry of the building. Its materiality has nothing really to do with the building. The brick that the building was made of came from Kingston back in the early 20th century. This is a CMU that is really antithetical to the building. The other areas that we're indicating is the single-story structure to the west of the building. And this is about it's about half of the area of the gym. A good portion of the gym, the eastern side, is actually contained within the body of the building, not the extension. Not that that extension isn't original, it is original, but it does appear as an extension to the west. And we're proposing removing that portion of the gym, which is to make way, again, to bleed off square footage that is unnecessary for the proposed use and the proposed square footages that we require in order to meet the housing proposal, as well as create room for parking, off-street parking, which is both a requirement in the zoning, the Bulkley Overlay District zoning, as well as a very good idea for the use. If you turn to the next set of images, you could keep scrolling. The photos that I've provided, the highlighted areas in this kind of more pinkish hue are the areas of proposed demolition. So in the these were reformatted for this presentation, but those are existing photos. You're seeing the area of the gym on the top two. You're seeing the area of the gym that were proposed for demolition. That is single story. That is not two-story. It's a single story. On the image on the right, you can see through some of those thalluja, and I think those are thalluja trees, I'm not really sure. You can see that area, slight area of red brick, which is the annex, and red CMU, which is the annex that we're also proposing to demolish. Bottom left is a view to the south from East Market Street. And again, that extension is pretty clearly, you can see a CMU, and then the bottom right is looking north, is looking west from South Street, from Mulberry Street, and the portion on the right is again the proposed piece of demolition.
Do you have any idea what it's going to look like if these buildings are removed? The damage to the 1931 building, the 1950s building, with brick. I think I said this last time, there's probably a hallway through there, and now there's going to be a bunch of windows there, and it's going to have to be a lot of work. Will you be able to make it look like the original building?
Right, so part of the proposal in our demolition, and we've sort of notified, we disclosed this in some other documentation that I think is part of the record, is that by doing the demolition of the portion of the gym on the rear, we intend to harvest that brick. That is original brick to the building. Right. We need a good brick that's not made exactly in that dimension anymore, nor has it been weathered in the same way, it hasn't existed in the same environment in the same way. So by harvesting that brick, we can use that both for new openings, lintels, brick detailing, soldier, herringbone courses that are proposed in the new design, as well as patch and repair in areas where demo has left scarification, scars, openings that we need to patch and repair.
What is the process of harvesting the bricks? Because every brick is going to have 6 sides. 4 to 5 of them are going to have concrete on them that's been there for 100 years. And if you knock over big walls, you're having a collapse of masonry that's holding together, and then some of them are breaking. Are you taking saws and doing out the grout lines and pulling them out one at a time? I mean, that seems, thousands of bricks, it seems to be very labor intensive, and between smoke and water and...
I'll let Mace jump in because he's part of this, but I will just mention before he does, the scope of the demolition, in other words, the area that we would be harvesting from, we could have almost a 60% loss of brick and have a remaining 40% that would be useful, that we would need. We don't need a 100% harvest return. So, Mace?
Yeah, I did, because I've done a lot of demo projects. There's no question that there's going to be a percentage of the brick that's going to be unsalvageable. When you do the demo, it's going to break. Like Michael said, there's going to be mortar under that's not worth cleaning off. But typically, you have a large percentage when you do demo of a brick building, even though it's 100 years old, where the mortar separates from the brick, a large percentage. It just does, it loosens up and freezes. And then there's also a process of removing the mortar from certain bricks that only has a little bit on. So you're not going to recover 100% of the brick, there's no question about it. But I think David's pretty accurate that you could end up with 60, maybe 70% of the brick is reusable.
And the process of getting the mortar off, I'm assuming that there's wet saws and there's, equipment that's, I work with concrete, I know. You hit that saw blade, it's an explosion of dust. So,
Excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt. But there's several different ways of doing it. You don't necessarily have to use a carbon saw or some type of a circular saw to remove it. You can also use a chisel. You can also use a hammer. There's a certain hammer that takes the mortar off. The mortar usually doesn't come, if you use a hammer and a chisel, it usually comes off in a clean piece as opposed to a saw, which is, it's also a lot more, it takes a lot longer to do with the saw than it would with just a chisel. Typically, that's the way they remove the mortar from brick, not with a carbon saw.
No, I do both, and I agree with you with chisel is, but it's also, building this size, it seems to be a lot of labor intensive, so.
Yeah, there's no question, Michael, that there's gonna be labor involved in cleaning the brick. That's gonna be part of the process. Some of the brick will come off clean, some of it'll be broken in half, some of it'll be salvageable and cleanable. And as of right now, we don't know exactly what that percentage is gonna be.
Do you have any idea what will happen when you try to take the annex off? What you
Well, the annex, none of the material that's made up is the part of the annex
Cinder block.
is gonna be salvaged. There's nothing to save there, it's just cinder.
But I meant, what will the wall of the building look like once the annex is gone? And how will you make that look like it's always been there?
We're gonna have to we'll use part of the brick that we used from the gym in it, and then we're gonna have to use others, trying to conform other types of brick. I would assume David could address that more.
The plan seems to suggest, though, that if you look at the detail of the plan, it seems to suggest the brick wall's still intact and the annex was only
So
a
that's
three-sided
correct.
box. Is that correct?
If you go into the building, that's exactly right. So if you go into the building, the brick wall of the original structure was not removed in order to add to the annex. The annex was merely attached on to the brick wall. At points where those attachments are made, like the bottom right or the left area of the shaded, bottom left of that shade, right? Surely there's some connection detail that when that gets removed, that's also a riser. There's some mechanical equipment coming up through there. There's going to be some scarring of the original structure that is going to need attention and repair. But the bulk of that wall was intact. It's been covered over with wallboard and gypsum, and we have not explored or probed to understand what its condition is at this point. But
The diagram shows a lot of windows will be going, and that might also assist you.
well, they'll be harvesting from those
The
areas as
harvesting
well.
window bricks. Yeah.
Right, so then both the north and the south facades will receive new openings in order to accommodate the layouts and
Right.
getting legal light and air for bedrooms and having enjoyable living space, right? So, yeah.
How many wide thick are the walls, the brick walls?
The walls are 2 wide thick, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 3 in certain areas of structural or furred out for detailing of, there's actually a fair amount of detailing if you look at the building carefully, and it's captured in some of our sectional drawings. It's kind of washed out now, or maybe it's just no one's really looked at it that carefully, but there's a fair amount of detailing, sort of crenellation, different uses of soldier coursing, different coursings set back from one another that also in certain areas has added a third white, a half white really.
And you think they're all exterior bricks or they interior bricks on the inside? They all the same quality, the interior wise?
You know, I did demolition under a second floor window in order to probe that wall. The bricks on the interior side look to be of a lower quality, but I didn't do an exhaustive demolition in that area.
Got it.
So,
So your goal is to get enough exterior face bricks to do what you need to do for aesthetics, and then interior
That's right.
bricks, it's going to just be filler at that point?
that's exactly right.
Okay.
And we have no intention of, in fact, the intention is to add insulation on the interior side of the envelope in order to create a building that thermally performs much better. So there's no intention of exposing any brick on the interior. So we wouldn't be either harvesting to repair those bricks. We would simply go back with no shrink grout or mortar in order to create something that has structural integrity, but then going in with new insulation.
Would that be the aesthetic inside the entire building? You'd favor insulation, R value, over exposed brick areas and things like that?
Given the quality of the brick and I think the commitment to a sustainable and high-performance building, we believe that is, the responsible thing to do environmentally, sustainably.
Just painting a picture, we don't have jurisdiction on the inside of the building.
Yeah, no, but it's just the ethos of what we do, which
I
is.
do like the 100 solar panels on the roof. That makes it really a sustainable building. It's good. But we interrupted you, I'm sorry.
No, those are all good questions. Again, I'm prepared to focus mostly on the demolition. If we want to flip, I think, further back in the presentation, really to the site plan, which has lots of information about septic and whatnot, but I think for our purposes, it really can illustrate the view corridors that will be ultimately exposed or not exposed.
David, I'm sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. Which of these documents should I open?
So if you could open the, not the appraisal,
It's in the
demolition,
demolition plan, right? C100?
Yeah, we just had the demo application.
keep
open.
going down, so writing. Civil subdivision, right in the middle of the page, perfect. There you go.
So this is only a conceptual look at the individual lots. There's just 4 boxes pending sale, and then the applicants will come in to build a building in the historic district, and we go through them one at a time, looking at each building that is desired by the applicant to be built.
That's
So
correct.
this is just a suggestion.
It's a suggestion insofar as there's no home design, and its exact location on the proposed lot is not definitive. There's room on each lot to adjust septic, driveway, and et cetera, and still maintain adequate lot coverage, the required lot coverage, and still have a 1,800 square foot 3-bedroom house. It is definitive in terms of what we are proposing for lots.
I have one more question on the demo site. So,
Yeah.
so you're knocking down pieces of building, going to be knocked down, crumbling to the ground. Going to raise a lot of dust. So will there be asbestos and lead paint remediation before the demolition so that any dust that could be asbestos or lead won't enter the neighborhood air? And secondly, what's the habit of demolishers? Do they stand there with hoses to hose down to keep the dust down?
So first question is, So first question, absolutely. Any remediation required by the DEP or environmental will be completed prior to demolition as is required by law, right? So all of that lead, asbestos, friable or not, will be removed safely prior to the demolition.
And for the rest of the main building, it can be encapsulated if it's not friable.
You can encapsulate.
Or you could remove it.
The scope of the renovation and the improvements that we're proposing to the building, probably, I can't say for sure, but probably would preclude saving anything, right? We're not going to be keeping risers and pipes that are
So you meant to do it on the main building
right.
as
So
well.
I can't say for sure, but it's unlikely we would be keeping encapsulating anything.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, to your second question, yeah, absolutely. So, a main component of a demolition project is a constant dust, control. And so water is typically the most, spraying water during those demolition events is typically the way you do it.
Any concern for runoff of any chemicals?
Well, there would be no chemicals used in the demolition, and we would be removing any environmentally,
Yeah,
right, friable,
beforehand.
non-friable, lead, things like that,
Right.
prior to the demolition. So, so I would hope not, but we could talk more about that in the context of a demolition contract or something, but, yeah. So in this sort of proposed, so again, to your point, the houses are not being proposed as such. These are feasibility to show that, we can have compliant lots, compliant homes, and compliant septic on those 4 proposed single-family lots. The lots, however, are being proposed as such.
When you're locked in with this 31 bedrooms.
So you're locked in with the 31
4 times
bedrooms.
3 is 12, and then the rest of the 31 is for the main building itself.
Well,
So
that's
that's it.
one of the main reasons, well, that's a big reason why demolition is needed. When the applicant first came up with this concept of multifamily housing, they were looking at a lot more units and reusing a larger portion of the building. But being so limited by the number of bedrooms that they can have in the building, it doesn't make sense to have such a large space when you can't add more bedrooms or additional units. So this is how we make the building, we preserve the building and adaptively reuse it by allowing it to be reduced in size so that it can be constructed with multifamily units.
I mean, as an example of that, right, if we had another 4,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet because we weren't doing any demolition and allocated that evenly over the units, we'd be ending up with 2,500 square foot 2 bedrooms or bigger, 3,000 square foot 2 bedrooms, which is really not a marketable, product at a rent that is going to be economically feasible for the project, right? So that doesn't work for us or for the village.
The village, when they created this overlay district, did they, you mentioned it, certify how many number of bedrooms is the maximum you could have in this building?
Yes.
They did, 19
It's
bedrooms.
19,
is
what's
the-
left?
19 bedrooms is the maximum number of bedrooms that you can have in the building.
And that's what you got?
That's what we have.
So they're mostly 2 bedrooms.
There's 9 2-bedrooms and 1 1-bedroom. That's right. And through the course of the next phase, we could look at, different unit mixes, but either way, 19 bedrooms is the maximum.
So when you sell these lots, it has to make clear to the applicant, the buyer, that you can have 3 bedrooms.
That is also indicated in the village code that was written.
Right.
Right, and that furthermore, that an ADU, well, if you had a 1-bedroom house, you would be allowed, I suppose, a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom ADU. But a lot cannot sustain more than 3 bedrooms in a combination of a family home and an ADU. It can't. In no combination could. So. And that is primarily driven by the septic capability of the lots, as in the entire 1.44 acre.
So that was the calculation that generated the 31, the size of the entire lot. Because it's not clear how they came up with 31, it's such an odd number.
Yeah.
That was part of it, yes.
Okay.
So the one way to, if you're concerned about controlling those additional lots, we could add a note on the subdivision plat when it comes time to approve it, so that everyone that buys a lot is on notice that the lot is limited to a 3-bedroom home, total of 3 bedrooms.
I mean, that's already in the code, right?
It's in the code, it's locked in.
And we could deed restrict it as well.
Yeah, probably
Belt and
hurt
suspenders, the whole thing, but it's already in the code.
Right. I think the only issue would come about if the first one built 5 bedrooms, it would limit the value of future lots
Right.
because you'd be low on bedroom count.
The note
for
on the
them.
subdivision plat is, I think, a good way to make sure that
You
no
might
one else
have to
eats up the
Right.
density.
Correct.
Not a first come, first served, building a
Right.
mansion and then let everyone.
131 bedroom.
Right.
With the closet, yes.
All right, well, if we could zoom out just again to look at maybe the site plan, the site plan on this same page. Thank you. I think what is worth discussing here are the views and what the demolition, I'm going to assume for the sake of this discussion that the annex and its demolition is a benefit in everyone's eyes. Maybe it's not, and I'm happy to discuss that more thoroughly, but for the sake of this discussion. So really we're talking about the demolition of the gym and what that means to the public or potentially neighbors and others walking those streets. I think it's fairly clear if you've walked that the East Market views, particularly even now, even if those 2 lots 1 and 2 were to remain fallow, in other words, never had a home built on them, that the view of the demolished portion would be the view of the building would almost be unchanged, even post-demolition.
Or improved.
Well, it'll be improved due to the fact that I believe it'll be improved due to the fact the annex is removed. It will not be made any worse due to the fact that the gym is removed. Similarly, I think you could say the same for the view from Mulberry, where the gym is essentially a rear lot condition and is next to impossible to see from East Mulberry. So then the question really becomes South Street and what the view from South Street, how that will change. And and be better or worse depending on your opinion. We believe that once the landscaping proposal is approved, which is phase 3, 4, or 5, I'm not really sure, of our process, together with the single-family home construction, the infill homes on lots 4 and 5, that the view, that you will not really be able to notice the fact that the gym has been removed. And so, for those reasons, we're proposing, to remove the gym. So the idea, again, that the views are principally improved from East Market and Mulberry, relatively unchanged from South, and provide for a better layout of area within the Bulkley Schoolhouse Adaptive Reuse Project itself, the building itself.
And then the way that the public interfaces with the building now, how they view the building when they're walking across the street or along the street, will remain unchanged. The historic portion is going to remain standing from the
Correct.
quarry. And so you'll still be approaching it, it'll still identify as an institutional or educational building, and retain that historic attribute. Another interesting thing that's worth pointing out is that when the Rhinebeck Historic District was first built, this was considered non-contributing, and then over the years it gained its own historic significance. So only a few years ago this would not have been deemed worthy of preservation, and now we're in a situation where it must be preserved.
Well, it's a moving target. The state was, after 50 years, you can consider a building, and 20 years from now, say, as a perfect example of a split-level ranch from the 70s, and we have to preserve that. So, it's not all Victorian houses that federal houses are looking at. I'm just thinking about, I don't think a lot of people are in love with the cinder block building, the annex. But people might, at the public hearing, start to say, why are you tearing down part of the original historic building to build a parking lot? Couldn't you think of a better way to do that? And,
Well,
Who came up with the 19 in the building?
who came up with the 19? Well, I mean, principally I did, or we did, but it was driven by the mathematics of a combination, right? Mathematics of what could be supported on a septic basis, right? We don't have village septic here, so it's all in-ground septic. So what could the lot support? And then when you look at the architecture of the layouts, what are reasonable layouts, right? So again, having a 10,000 square foot two-bedroom, and I'm exaggerating, obviously, for the sake of this discussion, but it is not reasonable. So trying to look at two bedrooms that were in the kind of 900 to 1,200 square feet, one bedrooms that are in the 700 to 900 square feet, and allocate those spaces nicely. Also, we had a commitment to ADA compliancy, both full and partial, depending upon the floor that you're on. Those were the metrics, and then some aesthetics that were governing the bedroom count.
Wouldn't it be fair to say, though, that you had a larger proposal at one point, and it was modified once you received reactions, the initial reactions from the village board and the public?
We did. We had a much larger proposed 17, I believe it was, bedroom count, unit count. The bedroom count hadn't been yet determined, and that would have driven a very different organization. But
So
that kind of density, I think, rightfully so, met with, a fair amount of, criticism from the community
Okay, that's where it came from, because
in terms of density
I never
and
went to any
potential
of
traffic issues.
too
and
many of
things like
those
that.
meetings and everything, and I was just looking at the gym and thinking, you call it a one-story, but it's like you could put a second story in there and get apartments in there and perhaps reduce, you know. Number 4 and maybe number 2 wouldn't be there, you'd have more septic or more parking on there. But since it's already kind of been determined by the village board and that they determined that you can get 19 in there and that's it, it's kind of leaning toward that, and you say that the community wanted less density, so.
We did in fact have a version where we did exactly that. In fact, we popped the top of the gym to create another 3 feet of head height,
Right.
to have 2 really 8-foot floor-to-floor
Okay.
kind of apartment floor plates,
Right.
and did just that.
Okay.
But I think where we arrived was a reaction to the level of density and what that would mean contextually for the community.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you're saying one of the determinants of the 19 bedrooms was that you could fit a legal septic for 19 bedrooms on this site, is that correct?
Well, the lines were drawn after the lines and the septic kind of go hand in hand. So when we got to a density that the village could accept, then everything went.
Right, so
Okay.
so the
then-
play was looking at single-family home lots of an 8,000 square foot minimum size, which was
Yeah.
the current zoning of the village at the time. And then how to apportion the land nicely so that those homes could exist while having a adaptive reuse of the building to create a multifamily residential.
So you're confident that you can put a 19-bedroom septic on here?
Yes,
Is that what this is, by the way?
so the green and the black
Yeah.
dotted lines are primary and secondary
Okay.
fields. So Mr. Hildenbrand, who's the engineer, has done his homework on this.
Okay.
This has not been, and the land was perked, and David Pearson from Dutchess Health came and inspected.
Mhm.
But it has not received Board of Health approval at this time because I don't want to do that until I have a project that I
We want
think is
to
green.
put the cart before the horse.
Right.
And so the removal of this portion
Yes.
of the existing gym affords the ability, presumably, to put a legal septic and enough required parking, off-street parking, on the lot. Are those the two main things that
There's
govern?
a third thing that
Go
goes
ahead.
into the kind of special sauce, which is lot coverage, right?
Right.
So any building sitting on any legal lot can only cover 30, well, not any, but in this case, in this district, 30% of the lot,
Uh-huh.
right? That's to maintain open space, light and air, prevailing wind, breezes, things like that, right? So that's the other component that goes into the kind of design puzzle that gets worked.
And there's not a lot of outside space, because in these lots, they're pretty crowded. You could have any inside space in the building? A lot of buildings have a gym, a meeting room that can be shared, some of a birthday party for your daughter or something. Certain laundry rooms will probably be there somewhere.
So all the units, so on the one hand, no, we don't have a communal space other than sort of large outdoor spaces and things like that, but we don't have an indoor yoga room or a gym or something like that. There's laundry in every single unit, so a building required laundry, a building shared laundry is not proposed. We have also storage rooms external to the unit, both in the basement and on floors, that are fairly ample, I would say, for all the unit renters.
That includes indoor bike storage.
There's indoor bike storage and exterior bike storage, but the indoor bike storage is adequate to meet the requirement, the 2-for-1 requirement.
David?
Yeah.
During the village board's process, I think the proposal came from the applicant, but ultimately the required outdoor parking was reduced. The ratio of the number of spaces that was necessary was reduced, in part to increase the amount of outdoor space that would be behind the project. And furthermore, I'd have to find the provision, but the law essentially requires a portion of that space to be used for some form of outdoor recreation, like a picnic table or something like that. And that was all part of the concept. So I forget what the ratio was. It was down to 1.3 or 1.0.
1.25.
1.25. So the point was to get some more space back there. to have some, at least outdoor recreation, which doesn't fulfill exactly the same function as indoor common space, but that was, it was on the minds of the board to increase the recreational potential of it.
Yeah, that's the document you gave us and said, below this line is what you have control over. So is there an element in there that mentions you said you thought there was something in there about open space?
Oh, I'm gonna get my glasses now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we did, let me say.
Yeah, as you pointed out at the last meeting, our responsibility is to look at sections D, E, F, and J. Is it in any one of those sections?
Sure, my guess is that it would be, let me just double check for you.
I think it raises the point of maybe just update the bulk table on the site plan to reflect the BSO zone. And then we could see that just as any normal site plan review, because that's now the standard which you're held to. So all we need to do is check the box to say that it meets the required open space, has the right amount of parking, the FAR is right, and then it's a simple check.
I think in a separate document that's on the Dropbox now, there is that matrix.
Yeah, and I just think it's the one in the plan, you know, if you like.
Well, oh, to
full
combine,
submittal
sure,
has
sure,
everything
sure,
up to
sure,
date.
yeah.
Because now our standard, the one we look at is the Buckley School overlay, and that's it. So everything is just measured against that,
Got it.
regardless of what any other zone in the village says. And that's, I think, the point in this process where, as a planning board, we would look to confirm those things is through your bulk standards table.
Got it.
And then we could verify it from seeing it with
Sure,
our two eyes on the site.
Put that on the plan,
Yeah.
let that be.
I think that would help a lot, and it would take all the baggage of what used to be the zoning there away
Got it.
and give us the laser focus
Yeah.
on what you're allowed to
Yes.
do today. Because I assume that you're submitted a compliant plan in
Definitely.
every respect to that new zone.
Yes.
So since all that lead agency was handled by the village board, as David had told us, we're up to design, traffic, noise, construction activities, entrances, building orientation,
Yes.
shared driveways, all these are planning board decisions that we will go over during site plan.
Yeah, just FYI, what David Gordon has pointed out is in the law, section D10 states, Buckley Schoolhouse amenities, to the extent practicable and consistent with the goals of this section, including HDO design considerations, the site plan shall include amenities for recreational or leisure activities on otherwise unused open space on the Bulkley Schoolhouse parcel, adapted for reuse as a multifamily residence.
Sure.
It's D10, if you have it
That was like way too many words, just basically telling you that if you want to, infuse this with more dedicated recreational space, there's some land back there, and that land was increased by the fact that the parking ratio was dropped down to 1.25.
So on that whole septic and reserve septic areas, there's only really open green space in the back. You could put swings or something,
That's the
Yeah.
point.
kids' playground or
Picnic
something in
tables.
there, sandbox, whatever.
Is there something that you'd like to see?
I don't know, three-bedroom apartments indicate, children.
Right now, there's 2 bedrooms.
Right
now, there are two
Adults
bedrooms.
play in
It
sandboxes.
still could be children.
But
Okay, so we can come back on the site plan
Sure.
and propose
Yeah.
something recreational in that area. It can't, because the reserve area, we can't put long-term structures on it, but, picnic tables, swing sets, those should be
Right.
fine.
But the agenda
Long-term
item
structures
today
would be
is,
lot coverage anyway, so we would be able to do that.
Right, we'll be able to do that. So it's only, and in the winter, there is no recreational space in the building itself. 'Cause
Correct.
They're not going to have any.
I mean, you should know, at one point, there was a concept for the roof to be used recreationally, but that was squashed, and now it's specifically in the code that the roof cannot be used, and solar panels will
The
go.
neighborhood objected to the use of the roof for recreational purposes.
There was a lot of discussion about how best to use the building.
but tonight, we're strictly talking about completeness with respect to the demolition application.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah,
So we're
that's
focused
why
on
I was
chapter
trying to-
64.
We're just talking, because we have to go over, I sent, Ryan found section 64 and gave me, I sent the copy to everybody to look over the reasons for demolition. And then we had the stuff that was sent out by you guys for the justification for the demolition.
Yeah.
And we have to match that. we've had, I believe, 6 full or partial demolition permits since the law went into place 10 or some years ago. The partials were granted. The two of the 4 complete demolitions, one was for Jeff's house, 37 South Street, one was for the police station out back here. And that was a 3-2 vote. It could have gone the other way. And then we would have had, I don't know, plenty, zoning board of appeals or courts or whatever happens after that if it's denied. So we take this seriously, knocking down historic structures. As I said, I don't think anybody object to the annex, but they'll want to know why the public will want to know why you're taking down. Couldn't something better have been thought of than knocking down part of a historic building to build a parking lot? That's not adaptive reuse, that's 2024 life in the village to have enough parking for people.
Right, and of course, our argument back is that by doing this partial demolition, which really won't change the interface with the street or be visible to the public, it helps preserve the building for adaptive reuse. Because, as you know, when historic structures can't be adaptively reused, they often go into disrepair and then they ask for a demolition permit after it's been neglected. So, trying to find and breathe life into the historic building through this partial demolition, that's the real rationale for it.
Most of the construction issues with historic buildings or partial demolitions of historic buildings are, we're going to do it in the back of the house where it can't be seen from the street. We want to put a kitchen and dining room in the back, and we'll use the same trim going around the building. I'm too old to get up the stairs. I want to build a master suite in the back where you can't see it. So we understand adaptive reuse for modern living of historic buildings. It's a fine line we walk every week,
It is.
you know.
I mean, at one point, this board also allowed there was a historic barn that was demolished.
Yep.
And that was very prominent on the streetscape. So, this would, again, preserve the streetscape.
Yeah, I mean, if John Clark's not here the next few weeks, but, he always said we don't want to lose these barns. And if you say, well, can you save it? Well, if you let me do this, I can save it, but if it's again, and it's in the law, it can't be financially difficult. Like, 37 South Street was, if you abandon the building, leave the windows open for 5 years, you're going to go in there and sell it, the building's falling apart, Now you have to give it, and it's more money. Financial hardship was one of the rules in here. So I think we need to look hard at the Chapter 64 and what your comments are about the justification for tearing it down, compare the two and make sure that we're comfortable with that and that all T's have been crossed, I's have been dotted, when the board's happy with it.
I've been asked by people, they just, if you're on the planning board, they stop down the street. And will there be a public hearing tonight? When will it be, et cetera? So the answer is there will be public hearings later on, after we get through the first couple of rounds of things, starting tonight with your demolition letter, right? And so that the public knows there will be a public hearing, not just for the demolition, but for everything. Public hearing is required for the demolition, and the applicants, according to Section 64, are required to explain a whole, like there's an 11-point long list of things that they will describe, like the history and use and ownership, the engineering evaluation, economic feasibility for rehab, etc. So they'll explain all of that at the public hearing. And I don't think we will go through that tonight. I think the letter that you provided is a good starting point, which describes what you're asking to do. The annex and the rear portion of the gymnasium.
And I think we need a little time to digest this, compare Chapter 64 to the letter that you sent, and we can talk some more at the next meeting. And I'd like the public hearing to be when John Clark is back. He'll be back at the July 16th meeting, and perhaps I see how the board feels about that, if you feel we would be comfortable enough
I think also that because this is a big and important project, that we as a board should take a tour of the building in and out. I mean, my wife worked there forever, I did work there a lot, I'm familiar with the whole building, but the rest of you aren't, and the neighbors, so I think it would make sense for the board to visit either individually or in groups that we don't discuss, amongst ourselves at the time, but things can be pointed out.
We're allowed to go as a group if we direct questions to you, and we don't say,
Don't do each
John,
other.
what do you think of that, or Jeff, what do you think of that? We can direct questions to you and get answers back to us, but we can't talk to each other.
Correct.
Otherwise, we have to go in groups of twos.
Well, I'm happy to host a tour of the building if you all want to put together some dates that you as a board are prepared to meet, then I will certainly make myself available.
Go through Ryan, so.
Yeah, we can go through
It's a good
Ryan.
idea.
Just a question about, sir.
Oh, no, I was going to talk about the public hearing.
Yeah.
Are we looking to plan the public hearing on the full application, so the demo permit and the site plan, or are we parsing them out?
Well, demolition permits, in my opinion, I don't know what the rest of the board feels, is the most important thing. I don't think that the subdivision is a difficult question to answer. It's pretty obvious, and I think it looks pretty good to most of us. The key thing is the demolition permit, and we have to have the public hearing. This has to be a public hearing too, but I don't think,
On the
everyone
site
will care
plan.
much about that. And of course, there'll be one at a time. There'll be site plan approval for buildings in the historic district, one at a time over the
I
next
think
months.
it makes sense in some, hear me out. I think it makes sense to have a public hearing on both the demo permit and site plan and subdivision together, because when the public gets up, they may not separate their comments, right? I think they're gonna wanna comment on multiple issues at a time.
I don't think chapter 64 allows for that,
For what?
to cover three things in one public hearing.
I mean, you
Chapter
can,
64 was designed to have a public hearing strictly for the partial removal or demo. David, would
I'm
you
going to look it up, but
disagree on that?
my instinct would be, unless there's some prohibition, it is not uncommon to have concurrent public hearings. It happens all the time with seeker, which actually doesn't even require a public hearing, and site plan, seeker and subdivision. In a situation where you're doing site plan and subdivision, it's often done at the same time, depending on what the board wants to do. This is a situation where the board doesn't have seeker authority, so the board could decide to, stagger them, but I will look at it if they have to. I would be, my instinct would be that, that it's not legally necessary. Whether the board thinks it's logically necessary is a different issue.
right, and you can publish your hearing notices and open each one at the same time so that the hearing.
The publishing is fine.
Yeah.
What I'm bringing up for the board is digesting everything, because you're going to have the public commenting literally on everything at once.
Right.
Yeah.
I know, we'll have to think about
Not
it.
necessarily meaning that the board has to close the public hearing that night,
Correct.
but I think for them on this side of the table, addressing first the certificate of removal demo, and then proceeding to a separate public hearing for subdivision and site plan, or even,
Well, let David check out if we,
There's one thing I want the board to be aware of, which is that if the board perceives it necessary to stagger the permitting, which is almost a practical necessity here, the seeker is done, so you're not going to have like a unified environmental review, you're basically doing permitting. If you want to stagger the permitting, you can, assuming the law allows you to do, doesn't have a restriction on holding a joint public hearing, and I don't think it does, but I'll check it out, then your permit will still be staggered. You can hold a public hearing on the whole thing. And just because you hold a public hearing on the site plan approval, well, actually, you do have 60 days at that point once you closed it. So you could stagger the closing of it. There's a bunch of ways around it, but let me double check to see what the...
Well, I think it comes down to the time periods in the different sections of the law that we have to act in, and how long.
Usually 62 days.
Right, but then for the three different approval types and how those would mesh with one another.
And
Just don't close the public.
we would waive time periods as necessary, assuming, the board is moving forward, and
Yeah, we can always reopen a public hearing too if there was
Yes,
some new
yeah.
information that came to light.
Because
In
once,
fact, this sounds like something Victoria had mentioned. So David, when you do this research, something Victoria suggested at the last meeting was, is it possible, because there will be, look, there's demolition, there's subdivision, there's site plan, right? And there's going to be comments and public feedback on all of them. Is it possible to do the demolition meeting and the public hearing on the demolition, and if all are agreed, issue a conditional demolition permit that's conditioned upon and can't be done until the subdivisions are approved?
The answer to your question
Was
is.
that, you were
legally-
suggesting that last time?
Yeah, we were having a conversation about timing, and I think the site plan would need to be conditioned on the plat being filed because the lines
Okay.
wouldn't work otherwise.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then the demolition has to occur before the plat is filed.
the annex is sitting on lot
So
two.
yeah, there's a,
Yeah,
I
so
can
that-
sit down with David and try and
Okay.
put together an order of
You can't get there
operations.
from here.
The direct answer to Jeff's question is yes. Once you start giving approvals, you can condition them on whatever the board thinks is necessary, including procedural things. And you know, for instance, every subdivision approval is always conditioned on getting the septic approval from the county. So it's not even necessarily something from this board, it could be from another board, and you know.
Okay.
So you can condition a special condition for a particular approval on getting another approval. There's no, you know.
Approve the county for what? Because once the lot line and subdivision take place, then these other four buildings fall off the map.
It's a
And we're
real,
only dealing with site plan for the center of the
It
place.
was just a for instance that typically occurs in a rural subdivision in the town.
in this case, because it's 5 lots, it's considered a realty subdivision, which requires the Department of Health to endorse the plans and approve the septic. So in order to file the plat, the Department of Health will need to sign off on the
5
availability of
septics.
5 septic systems.
Okay.
Each individual person can
Okay.
come in, move it, do whatever they want. They can work on their own, but there will be a basic Board of Health approved lot.
And the Board of Health will have to go with 3 bedrooms per unit.
Yes,
And
that,
that's what they'll be approving the septic for.
yeah, so it'll be a Board of Health approved lot for a 3 units.
And after that, then they drop off and we just deal with site plan for the center structure.
If that's how you want to do it. I
Now-
mean, I would like to sit down and maybe come up with an order of operations. I understand it makes sense for your review to review it sequentially, but the approval, we will talk about the order that it
Yeah,
should.
but, I mean, the approval's nothing done so that it complies with the law. I just looked up the hearing for the demolition permit in chapter 64, and actually, the only requirement I see is that there's a 62-day requirement, but it's the opposite of what's typical. You have to hold a public hearing within 63 days of the application being complete. So it's not like you have to, it doesn't say, well, I could look that up, whether you have, when you have to give the approval. But after the application is complete, you got to hold this public hearing within 62 days. But other than that, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of how we structure it. And if the, you know, if the board ultimately wants to stagger the approval, we can do that. What I would suggest is if we do hold a joint public hearing, then ultimately, let's say you want to give a demolition permit first and condition it, you close that portion of the public hearing, you proceed with the permit, and leave the public hearing open with respect to the site plan approval, for example. So we can, there's a lot of flexibility here. There's not a lot of rules stopping us from doing things.
But site plan's only going to be for
The main,
the main building.
Correct.
The rest is going to happen over the next couple of years,
Correct.
whatever. But it will be required that those 4 units have Board of Health approval for the septic system.
before the plat can be filed with the county clerk.
Okay.
Well,
That,
do you actually have to get approval for those
yeah,
septic systems?
that happens between board approval and then before it can be filed and the actual lot lines created, it needs to be.
So it's not just a demonstration that the septics are...
Right now it's a demonstration to show you that these lot lines work and, you know, proof of concept. But between your approval and going to the county clerk, that's how you actually create the lot, you file a plat. The Department of Health will need to approve the lots. And so that's why it needs to go hand in hand with the site plan for the Buckley Schoolhouse, because they will also need to approve the site plan, the at that time, approve the wastewater treatment system and water for the Buckley Schoolhouse. And so the subdivision and site plan are hard to separate because you can't do one without the other. And if anything changes, both will have to come back before this.
The other thing that the board, I'm sure, is aware of, but it bears repeating, is if you have 3 different permits that we're considering here, there's a very good chance that not everybody, but many people of the public are not going to carefully differentiate between the permits, and if they feel strongly about some aspect of the project, and we hold a permit on the demolition, a hearing on the demolition permit, there's a very good chance that some of the comments that come in will not necessarily directly relate to the demolition permit. It may relate to one of the other things that we're talking about, such as the recreational space or something like that. And, that is a very common feature of public hearings, that people don't always stick between the lines that the board might want. So that's another reason to have a joint public hearing, not to try to create too many lines, because the best designs of the board may not be picked up by everybody in the public.
Yeah, but I could argue that the other way, in that, when we focus on them one by one, the intent is, the focus is on the thing that's at hand. And yes, there might be some distraction, there might be some infiltration of other comments, but I worry that if we mix demolition and site plan subdivision, we lose focus on some of the key elements of site plan while we're working on the key elements of demolition. So I think there might be a dilution of some of the focus on the things that are very different in those 2 applications. So my
You
opinion,
have the authority to do it one after the other, if that's what you want to do.
I just see there's a benefit to it. I understand the applicant's point, but I think the applicant gets to the same place either way. I think if you take it sequentially, you're following the steps in order. If you take it at the same time, you're doing them together. And I don't know that there's a difference in time period associated with that. I would say it's probably more, maybe it's just more of a question for the applicant. And if you feel you need the site plan and subdivision to justify the demolition to make your case, maybe that's an argument that you really want to push for it. And on the other side, I think if you break them apart, it might be easier to deal with each issue one by one and get the focus that those issues should have.
Just for clarification, we're only talking about issuance of a demo permit. You're not expecting the applicant to go out and actually demolish before we do the
Right.
site plan subdivision?
Right.
Okay, so,
We understand you can't sell lot 2 with the building sitting on it, so.
right,
We understand that.
Because you're fairly, I don't want to use the word, but complete here with a demolition argument, right? But I don't think we're fairly complete tonight in this discussion or with what's been submitted to fully vet out a site plan and subdivision application. Now, I know those
I
documents
actually
exist.
agree with that, and I think that is somewhat strategic. It's also somewhat efficient for us, right? So, and I'm happy to produce more in an inefficient way, but that's not ideal.
You're agreeing with the segmentation of the process?
Yeah, because look, if let's imagine demolition is not approved, right? A whole host of issues about entrances and landscaping and all sorts of other things have a very different context and a very different design solution than the one being contemplated at this time, that hasn't been fully represented. But if we are sequentially achieving, we can produce along the lines of, okay, we have a demolition, we agree that the demolition of, a third of the, half of the gym is appropriate, then we can start to talk about, okay, so what do we do with that space from a landscaping or recreational point of view? But if we're not going to demolish it, I'm designing into the ether, right?
And I would add, if
Or if I don't have a decision, I'm designing into the ether.
for sure, and I would add that if we felt it appropriate to issue a demolition permit, we should stand by that decision whether or not the subdivision around it happens or not, because there's no guarantee that those houses get built if we issue a demolition permit, right? So we need to accept the consequence of issuing that permit or not, regardless of what might happen around it, unless for some reason it's a really, really strong justification in your minds to argue that that's why you need the demolition permit, because just things change.
But in terms of the sequence, whether we decide to do them all at once or segment it, I just have 2 questions. Number one is that I think I understood you, David, to say that once the demolition permit request is accepted, the clock starts ticking for a 62-day before you must have the public hearing.
Correct.
So-
And after the public hearing is closed, I just looked up, you have 30 days to make the
Okay.
decision.
So now my question to the applicant is, are you officially submitting the request now, or do you want to wait a little bit so that we don't paint ourselves into a corner with timing?
But it's completeness, Jeff. It's when we deem it complete.
Right,
So-
it has been
Yes.
officially submitted.
Okay, so it's not considered officially submitted until we deem it complete?
Well, it's not considered complete until you deem it complete. Let me get the exact
Okay.
wording for you.
Then we don't have to deem it complete tonight?
Typically, yeah.
No, what I would like to do is, like Ryan gave us, and I sent it to everybody,
Yeah.
chapter 64, let's look at what the applicant submitted, let's look if anything is missing
Yeah.
from what these many points on these many pages, is like, it's over a dozen
Words, I
pages.
can tell you the
Make sure
words.
they've clarified everything
Okay.
that's in the code.
Yeah, I would suggest then, to David's point, I would suggest that in your application, your letter, here we go, which is pretty brief, because in chapter 64, you will need to, when the time comes for the public hearing, answer these, section 64A, 64C, 1 through 11. You might as well put them in the application. You're going to have to, discuss them in the public hearing anyway.
Maybe we could send our comments to Ryan and get that to them before the next meeting and say, we see that you're not clear about number 3, number 7, and number 9.
Yeah.
And we don't want to leave anything open for your benefit. So at a public hearing, people will stand up and say, hey, what about number 3? That says, I don't know, financial hardship. What's the financial hardship?
Yeah.
It would cost more to fix it up than demolish it, which was the justification to tear down Jeff's house, or the house before Jeff's house. It would cost more to fix it up, and it'd be a really crappy looking house when it was fixed up, because it would be too small, the rooms are too small. So that was a big justification for it, like leaving the windows open for 5 years. So I'd like us to look at this for the next week or so and get to Ryan our feelings. It's not clear in what you said, what's in the code, and that could come up at the public hearing and,
So,
go back at you. Does that make any sense?
I am still somewhat uncomfortable though with only focusing on this public hearing or this effort on the demolition permit only without the site plan, without the consequences to the site plan, because the two are so integrally linked, right? The portions being demolished, the allocation of space, the lot coverage, and the availability of the remainder of the land for potential building sites are all part of a puzzle that work together. And so talking about demolition of one piece without the consideration of what, if we say no to that, what are the consequences to the remaining portion of the land?
You have to build
is not really
12 bedrooms in the annex to
Pardon?
come up with a 31, something like that.
Well,
You know,
What I hear-
sorry, the gym.
what I hear you saying, though, is that the demolition permit, however it comes out, is going to have a significant role in driving the site plan.
Yeah, and I would say to some extent that the planning board, I would think, would want to be working both sides of that.
Well, that's not clear. I mean,
I thought you were saying something
if
different
the
earlier.
demolition permit is
I
going
was-
to drive the site
I
plan,
was to some extent, sorry.
then if the board wanted to hold a hearing on the demolition permit and decide that seems consistent with your vision. If you're going back the other way, then what you're saying is the site plan issues are going to drive the demolition permit, and then that
David, maybe I need a little bit of clarification because I don't understand the vocabulary. So I understand demolition, and then, where do things like entrances, landscaping, recreational swings, is that site plan?
Site plan. That'll be the
And
third
so,
thing.
and so how about just the lot creation? What are we calling that?
That's subdivision.
Okay, so maybe what I'm saying is I think we should focus on demolition and subdivision as a coordinated effort because the two are integrally linked. And then when we get to site plan, we can go into all that detail about brick coursings and entrances and light
Right. Oh,
options.
yeah, that's
and
part of the site
What
plan.
kind of trees we want to have.
I don't think that the subdivision is controversial. You certainly want the land used if the demolition permit's agreed upon it. But I look out, I'm right on the corner. I'm right, that's my bedroom window. And rather than look at a vacant lot and an abandoned building, I'd rather look at the house and some trees.
I
So, you know,
expect-
I don't think people, it's the demolition.
I expect subdivision will be a big issue.
You think so?
Yeah, because we've already heard from John Clark. John Clark, in the process of coming up with the new code that dictates what can be done on the whole parcel, there was a lot of discussion that drew it down to ensuring that basically changed the residential and overrode the residential and historic district overlay code to say that the minimum lot size could be 7,000 square feet, not 8,000 square feet. Right? These are the only places right now in the village that applies to. And that, I think that was talked about a lot. I know that John Clark feels strongly about it, so I wouldn't say that subdivision is a slam dunk. But I agree with David that, you know, subdivision is going to be very important. So we agreed that, I think of the three, right, there is demolition, subdivision, site plan for the apartment building
Right.
on the agreed to subdivided lot. And we can, for whether we do them together, two together or not, if I understand it correctly, David, we can open and keep open public hearing
Yes.
across, right. And if,
I want to make you aware of one moving piece, though, in terms of what you were saying.
Yeah.
One of the reasons, and I think this was John's perspective, actually, one of the reasons why there is this interest in the subdivision as opposed to just sort of, you know, rubber stamping what they wanted to do, is that there was a sense of trying to get some more open space by moving, by making the lots maybe a little smaller, moving them down, et cetera. So there's an open space component to the subdivision. In addition to an open space component to the site plan that we, again, because the parking has been reduced a little bit. In terms of the subdivision, there's the opportunity for the planning board to move some of those lines and create some more green space. And if John were here, I'm sure he could explain this vision a lot better than I could.
and I think he would if he were here.
So
that's why I'm bringing that
I
up.
just want to point out,
Yeah.
that's a moving piece also,
Yeah.
in terms of what's been set up for you.
Yeah, okay.
So David, you're going to give us an opinion on whether we can insist on doing these together or separately, or we can allow the applicant to choose?
There's one more gear to throw in here, and that is when you talk about doing them together. You can do the hearings together or not, and you can stagger the approvals, the actual time when we sit down and go through the conditions, et cetera, in whatever way you want. So whether, even if we could hold a joint public hearing on all three, and then stagger the approvals in the way that we want, or we could say we're just going to do everything with the demolition permit, the Chapter 64 permit first, and, you know, so
Right, but I
doing
think-
them together means that you can do,
Maps.
you can have a public hearing and just hear from the public or not, and et cetera. So I want that to be
Understood, but
one of your key
I guess the
goals.
question is, there's nothing, we just need to determine if there's anything that requires us to do it one way or the other, right? If we're required to do them
Well,
separately
clearly,
for some
Dave's
reason.
vision is that we've got to get the blasting and the extent of the blasting squared away, so they even know what their site plan.
No, I understand their opinion, why they would want it, and, you know, I guess what I'm saying is I'm happy to make it their choice as long as you tell us there's no reason for us to do it one way or the other, or there's not going to be an intermeshing
So we've got a
of
couple things.
notice
We know we're
periods.
going to be giving the demolition permit before we give the site plan approval, and probably before we consider the site plan in too much detail. Now you can, so what's left now is to figure out where the subdivision goes and all that, given the moving pieces, and also how you want to conduct that public hearing.
Right.
And I can talk to Victoria about that, or we'll hear from you guys on it, for those of you.
Well, I guess the question is, what do we have to do, and what are we allowed to do, and what are we not allowed to do in this situation?
Ultimately, once we decide that the the Chapter 64 application is consistent with the requirements of the code, we've got to hold a hearing within 62 days, and we have to make a decision within 30 days of closing that public hearing. So that's I was going to read the exact language there so the board's aware of it. It says this: "The planning board shall hold a public hearing within 62 calendar days after receipt of an application completed in accordance with this section." So, you look at the application requirements, of which there are 5, including anything else the board wants as a catch-all for the board. But then there are 2 other lists, including the list of things they have to be able to produce if anybody asks for it at the public hearing, which for some reason is separate from the application requirements. And we can sit down and figure out how to read that, but that's the way this is structured in chapter 64.
But you're not trying to say that you're complete right now. You would prefer to say you're not.
On the demolition permit? No, we would like to actually move forward and start getting input on the demolition permit, because even though I think you have to consider the site plan conceptually for the demolition permit, right, you can't separate them conceptually, one goes with the other. As David said, the permit does set the tone for the whole development. And so we would like to move forward on the demolition permit discussion.
Yes,
Yeah,
but the
agreed.
demolition permit and the subdivision are for the whole parcel.
Correct.
Site plan is for number 3. That's what we're going to talk about. The rest is dirt.
And what I'd like to move forward on is the demolition and the subdivision for the whole parcel, so that we know what our site plan review will consist of. Right? Because otherwise, we don't know.
So I'd like us to get comments to Ryan about if we see that what you sent out agrees with what's in chapter 64. Make sure not so much for our benefit, but as I said, when it comes to the public hearing, we are, we work for the public, and we have to hear their problems, their issues, and have answers. And I don't want us to be sitting here and saying, hey, what's the matter with you guys? Didn't you see that number 3 and number 7 are not explained by the applicant? Why are you going ahead with this when they didn't meet the criteria? So
So you want to give us feedback on the application you've submitted? That's great.
Right.
Go
And
ahead.
we can talk about next time, and hopefully we can schedule that public hearing. John will be back on the 19th. Jeff's recording all of these, so John will have several weeks after he returns to look at the 3 videos and make sure he's caught up with us.
And then if any board members have initial feedback on the subdivision layout as well, we would like to hear that.
I'm not sure what the 7,000 square foot that John asked them to put in, they put it in the code. Is that something, is the lots are 8, what are these lots now?
They're all north of 8,000.
North of 8,000. So it'd be up to each individual purchaser if they wanted to have a little more green space and build a smaller house.
No.
No.
The law would allow the lots at this point in time to be shrunk even further or reconfigured. So maybe one lot is 11,000 and one lot is 7,000.
So we'd have to do this now, not,
Right. So that's why we're saying initial feedback on the subdivision would be helpful as well.
okay.
Yeah, because it's inextricably linked.
That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
What we've proposed does meet the dimensional requirements in the code.
Right.
So
Right.
it is an approvable subdivision to that sense. It's just,
8,000 is at least 7,000, so you meet the code.
yes. I will add that there was some discussion during the public hearings. The public has had a lot more view of this than you have at this point. And there was concern about these lots being smaller than other lots in the neighborhood already. So I don't know.
I mean, this looks, oh, it's gone, but the lots look quite small as it is with the garage and the driveway and the buildings and stuff and sidewalks. It's,
Right, we provided some analysis that shows they're actually consistent with other lots, but going smaller is not something that we studied.
Right.
Yeah.
In the comprehensive plan effort, there were many subcommittees. One of the subcommittees was a housing subcommittee. A lot of the notion of the folks on the housing subcommittee were that there should be smaller houses on smaller lots. One of the members suggested tiny houses, if you know what they are, which would look like, to me, which would look like a trailer park to me.
If they know the cost of construction,
Yeah.
it's not economically feasible, and it doesn't help do anything for families or school districts.
We need the village to look like the village.
Yeah.
It should, the
No, I think-
lots need to be the same, the houses need to be proportional to other houses on the block and adjacent streets around them. And that will be up to us when each of the 4 new owners come to the planning board with their design from their architect and what they want the house to look like, and we'll work on that. As I said, we did that with David Silver. He had 7 lots subdivided by Village Green, and one at a time, as each person bought a lot, they came to us with their architect, and we worked out the details of the design, which is what we'll have to do again. So, yeah, I understand. So could we have a concurrent public hearing where each issue would be explained one at a time, or we would move on to the second issue after we had some feedback on the first issue?
I mean, that's possible, yes.
I mean, what do you,
But I'm going to defer to how the board wants to proceed, and it
If you
sounds
guys
like...
want to do a marathon, you go right ahead. I don't know if you're going to have a clerk
You're gonna go to
at
sleep.
11 o'clock at night,
No,
or
no, no.
midnight.
We-
I don't know about that.
Ryan, I don't think it's
That's
going to
up-
be...
That's up to you guys.
We did it with the hospital. We had like 100 people that came, and I said, you have to stick, Ryan didn't bring a timer, but I said, come on, 3 minutes per piece. And if someone has already said it, there's no reason for you to stand up. Just say, I agree with Jack, that's fine. But I agree we should have, that's already been said, please, let's, for the sake of time and everybody in here, let's do that, so.
So I think we, based on, just following up on Darren's point, as long as we can understand from David, and we can take our time, as David suggests, to provide feedback on the document, as long as we understand what we can and can't do, we can probably move on to the next meeting, right, and continue the discussion. I don't think, the original intent of tonight was to really have an overview and focus on demolition, which I think we've done, unless you guys have other questions on demolition. I don't.
I just want to make a point of demolition. As I mentioned, that there's going to be a trigger when we determine that the application complies with the application requirements, in addition to the other sort of requirements that they have to be prepared on for issues. Number 5, the last application requirement is this. It says, any other information specific to the removal or demolition required by the planning board to make a determination on an application for certificate of removal, etc., including data to demonstrate compliance with the criteria for approval of a certificate of removal. So in other words, the critical aspect of the list that they have to comply with for the application in order to trigger the public hearing is this board's determination of what more information might be necessary. And I would suggest that we perhaps try to focus on whether we can, we angle the next meeting toward providing that information if that's possible.
That's what I've asked everybody to take a look at.
That's right.
And then get it to Ryan, that we see that we need more information on number 4 and number 8, because I don't
Okay.
want to have a public hearing and then the public says, wait a minute, and then we get in trouble with the public hearing. We continue the public hearing because we have to get answers, we have to come back with more answers. So I'd rather the application be complete to our satisfaction, but we have to, the public is who we serve, we have to listen to what they say. As I said, we had 2 very contentious, the police station. Why do you want to tear it down? It's a perfectly good building. It just doesn't, it can't be used as a police station. You want to tear down a historic building, you want to knock down a garage, a building because you want to make it a garage, there will be people who will have issues with that. And we had many times people say they want to meet with the chairman to discuss I said, no, come to a discussion on more than 5 votes. We're open, just come and talk to the planning board at the end of the meeting. What do we think about your proposal? Because I want everybody to comment on it, not me. Alone.
So if we do as you suggested and provide our feedback on the letter to Ryan, then we would be satisfying, as David Gordon points out, in section 64.4, item A5, any other information specific to the removal required by the planning board, etc., we would have satisfied that.
Once provided.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And then we can move on to the next topic.
We're obligated.
But
Yes.
if I could just say something, you know, we sat through, I don't know how many public hearings before the village board. And I guess you guys think there's gonna be a lot of commentary on the gym issue.
No idea.
It's really, I don't think it's ever been brought up, or there's been anybody really contesting it, because, I mean, it's been part of, everybody's kind of had a chance to hear about the entire plan, and part of the plan was taking down part of the gym. And of all the different things people commented on, that was, I mean, there was very little comment on that.
We don't anticipate it being hostile because the applicants have worked very hard to incorporate a lot of
What
the
was said.
concerns of the public and the neighbors. So, but, you know, again, we defer to you. I think we have a good plan, which is you are going to give us comments on the application so that we can work to address them. And your attorney and I, hopefully we'll have a conversation
Good.
about process so that, you know, we have a path to move forward.
And I think we should schedule the site visit while this is developing.
Yes.
Doesn't hurt to do
Okay.
it sooner
We'll do
rather
that
than
too.
later, right, Ryan?
You can, I don't know if you guys can do it, you have 2 weeks.
Yeah,
You have 2 weeks to comb through this and decide a site visit, or you comb through this with the comments and then decide on a site visit between June 18th and July 16th.
I think we can get this.
Yeah, I think 2 weeks is plenty of time.
I think combing through it is the site visit too, just
Yeah.
seeing things with our own two eyes.
Okay.
We're available weekdays, weekends, whatever is best for the board. We can do 2 groups if that helps, to get it between now and the
Ryan
next
can
meeting.
coordinate.
Yeah, we can, I'm sure we can find some time next week to take a walk through the building.
The only thing I'm not sure about is compiling our suggestions through Ryan and trying to come up with this unified, like, set of
okay.
notes.
I don't know if we can pass it around, because is that legal?
Well, maybe legal or not, which probably not, but we've also struggled with that in the past, right? Because then we get differing opinions on what should be added to the submission. So I was going to suggest at the next meeting, we come prepared with our comments to make them in this forum
Right.
to the applicant, discuss them in front of each other and see which ones stick, rather than try to sit down over the next 2 weeks and craft a letter, because we tried that once or twice and it's a little tough to do.
I agree, let's do that.
Good, we'll do that. And maybe, you know, like at 6:30, at the next meeting, we can meet with you for half an hour and make sure we're clear on what was agreed upon. It's hard, we can have executive sessions, but it has to be a public, I don't know.
This is.
We don't
this-
need the
this is not-
executives,
A couple of things. First of all, what Darren said is, number one, the board legally operates as a board. The board does not operate as individual free agents, so the board operates together. So therefore, that leads into number two, which is that this sort of decision is typically made by the board in a meeting, not by individuals. And so you have both the law and the custom on the side of Darren's suggestion. So having said that, I think the best thing is to do exactly that, come here. Now, the third thing is, this type of a meeting to go over this is not typically something that's, you know, we can have an attorney-client meeting, but...
So we're just meeting
I would
7 and
suggest
we're
you
doing that here.
the deliberations over this are typically the sort of, I mean, you can have an attorney-client meeting over everything, and that can be just a, you know, ongoing exception to the open meetings law. You have, you know, but something like this is actually the sum and substance of the public work done by the board, and so it would typically be done in an open meeting. There's nothing particularly sensitive.
Would you give
about
us comments then, or in the next 2 weeks about what you and Victoria have agreed on the process?
Well, that's going to be a tail-end thing. That's like, which do we do first? This is a front-end thing.
Okay.
This process gets started, well, it's already started, but the next critical step is for the board to determine what more information the board wants to see. And again, the law and the common practice is for the board to act as a board in an open, I mean, this is what you do on every site plan approval. When you tell the applicant, we want to see, you know, an engineering proposal that'll stop the 50-year storm or something like that, it doesn't take a formal vote usually, but the board is acting as a board with everybody
Okay.
speaking, and you tell the applicant, do this, and that's what you do all the time. This isn't an awful lot different, it just happens to be a specific aspect of the code, but it's not, and so therefore it might require a resolution, but it's the sort of thing that we do all the time. The board gives them feedback, essentially, that's all it says. Gives you feedback you feel confident that you and the public are going to need to evaluate this. That's functionally what that means, and it's something we would decide together. I mean, if you need to have an attorney-client session to go over some of the details, we can do that, but otherwise, it's the
Okay.
sort of thing that's very amenable to be done right here.
Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
And Ryan's gonna schedule a site walk, who's gonna reach
Yes.
out? You wanna do
Right,
it on my own?
we'll
I will
give Ryan-
kick the ball.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
we'll
you,
give
Ryan.
When we're available next week for a stroll. And the building, I've never been in the building. Okay,
Okay?
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
In 2 weeks.
You guys, right? That's what's peeling out on speed. I'm done.
You're done, yes, thank you.
Thank you, David Gordon.
Thank you. We have too many Davids tonight. We should change names.
So you can
Beard, you're next, you're on.
smoky book.
I like your decision to grow a beard.
Thank you.
I think you're nice beard. I've had this beard for like 40 years. I shaved my beard off once like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, my daughter said, "You're still my dad." So, I sat her on the toilet when I was there shaving and said, "Watch me, I'm shaving my beard." And then she freaked out, so.
You don't look the same. Right.
You know,
Okay, so we were before you May 21st? Correct.
yes.
We got some comments, some additional notes to go on the site plan and so forth, but most salient was the concern, zoning question. Introduce yourselves for the... I'm sorry, yes, sorry. I'm Warren Smith, architect. With me is Laura Reed Charles, applicant, for a new residence to be built at 37 Oldbury Street. Thank you. Yep, thank you for reminding me of that. So there were some questions posed about zoning. I think principally whether the accessory structures in the property, to include a garage, an accessory dwelling unit, and a third structure, which in this case would be a pool house, could in fact be all one building. And I had a meeting with Ken McLaughlin, and my understanding from that meeting was he felt it could be. There was nothing that precluded that. As long as we met the dimensional requirements, we shouldn't need a zoning variance. We worked, as Darren had suggested, or looked again at the dimensions, and in fact, if we just take the garage as the garage, two-car garage, we comply at 540 square feet is the maximum size of that, and we're 529. The apartment, I call it apartment, accessory dwelling unit, can be 750 square feet maximum, and we're at 724, including that entryway between the garage and the accessory dwelling unit. So we comply with that. The pool house, we're moving part of that to be a covered enclosed area, but not part of the pool house for the pool equipment. Something else you would raise a question. So I'm at 152 square feet. We're allowed to be 144. I'm sure I can lose another 12 square feet to comply with that. So with that, the footprint of these three accessory structures will comply with the standards for the property. Could you say the pool house numbers again?
Yeah, it's, right now I've got it to 152, and I can get it down to, I can do that. So that is that aspect of it, and so I'm hoping that you could set a public hearing for a meeting, perhaps not the same meeting you're going to be.
Next
time.
In 2 weeks, I think. I talked with Ryan, so
And we'll come back with revised drawings showing the dimensions on the plan, so you'll have that information, along with the things you requested at the May 21st meeting. And then obviously we'll take public comment and initial comments from the planning board at that time and see where we are with things.
Yeah,
But that's where we are tonight.
yeah, no, I think we're agreed that we don't want to do it
July 16th, not at all. So, Ryan will definitely have to go take a nap, me too. But yes, sure, we'll schedule it. We need a motion?
Yes, we do.
Okay, I'll make a motion for the public hearing on 37 Mulberry Street for June 18th,
Yes.
June 18th. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So we'll have whatever changes you.
Yeah, I'll get
make
revised
to
right
plans.
before that, and then we'll.
And public
Yeah,
hearings
if you
are
have them on
first,
there,
and you'll be
yeah,
first
submission, yeah.
next time. I'm sorry you had to wait an hour.
No, that's all part of the process.
Yes.
Me too.
I don't think there'll be a lot of public comment on that because it's a vacant lot and it's a nice looking building. And it's a big lot, 200 feet back, so
Deep line, yeah.
it's a deep lot, so it's plenty of room.
Is there any other design notes, anything else that stood out or that you didn't have, you saw after the fact that you want to share with Warren and the applicant, so they can be even more prepared for June 18th?
I think Ken's letter said it all. Bill got Ken's letter.
Well, Ken's letter covers those points, and then you had all made some comments at the last meeting about specifically cover coating the flues and what's in the swale, stuff like that. And I will address all that with the revised submission.
Good.
Yeah.
Now, do we want anything in hard copy? Or are we satisfied if it's electronic?
I think this one is easy enough to see electronically.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because a lot of the details are on the inside. And
Right. Was
that's
this,
that's not us.
was this the PDF that took 20 minutes to open at the last meeting? or was
No,
it-
that was.
No, you know, it's funny,
It's a different one.
you can almost
Okay.
always save the PDF reducing the file size, and
Yeah.
most people don't do that, but you
Yeah.
can cut the size dramatically, which makes it
I
much
do
easier
that.
to
Yes,
email and
yeah.
open.
Good.
When you have huge JPEGs and, or other things,
Yeah.
tips, it'll
Yeah,
take
yeah.
10 minutes, so.
Wonderful.
I learned that of my own self-defense, that I don't want these huge files.
No. Just save as a reduced file size, and it just goes, I had something that I put together, it was 96 meg, and it came out as 3.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, and it looked the same, it's only
Right.
words.
That was,
Right.
It's not like it was important to store a photograph or
July
a map or
16th?
something, didn't want to lose the
June
detail.
18th.
There's no difference, just words is words.
Right.
And I don't know why Adobe does that.
Right.
Before we wave goodbye, Chair, there's some procedural items the board needs to take care of. You guys need to declare lead agency because this little location is now part of the historic overlay district. So you need to have a motion and a second and a vote to declare lead agency.
Motion to declare lead agency.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And then, based on the short form that Warren submitted, is the board comfortable voting on the neg deck tonight, or do we want to wait and do that after the public hearing?
Usually, if I recall, that John prefers to hear from the public before the neg deck, doesn't he? And hasn't he said that at multiple meetings?
So we can lead by his example. He's not going to be there on June 18th, but we can
Oh,
lead
I'm not sure, I mean, it's
by his example.
I don't
pretty
know.
cut and dry, but I'm happy to wait.
But it's a short form, right?
Yeah.
Let's do it at the next meeting then. We'll take a look at the short form. If we haven't looked at it yet.
Okay.
Declare neg deck at the next meeting, which we can do in the same meeting as the public hearing.
Correct.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you for your patience.
Not at all.
No problem. Unless I could, thank you.
Okay.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Do we have some minutes? We have 2 sets of minutes.
Yeah.
So just before we dive into that, I just want to announce for the record, as we saw on the meeting agenda under new business, even though it was labeled as tentative, the KARC, the representatives did pull that presentation from the agenda due to needing further zoning clarification from Ken and Justin, and hopefully they'll be joining us either at the June 18th meeting or the July 16th meeting.
I explained to
Thank you.
Darren what they were looking for. It was on there somewhere, I lost it. So the 2 minutes that I want to thank Jeff and Darren for their dedication.
This is the, so let's start with the oldest one first. We just did the oldest two. There's February 20th. And here are, this is the draft, my comments in red, and Darren's comments in red and underlined.
What happened to blue?
It's strange, whoever opens it,
I can't
it
figure out
changes
how to do
colors,
that.
yeah. I know it applies different colors to different revisions, so like if you were to edit it now, it would give you a different color, but it chooses for you.
Okay, planning board. Oh, so here's my question on this. In the draft, what Miranda had written was the motion with the attached amended resolution. Remember that we went through and Darren very carefully updated and amended the resolution, which my opinion is we should just paste it into the minutes so that's for the record, because I don't think you can attach to a Word document. So I would just suggest let's get the amended resolution and say amended resolution is in the appendix of these minutes, and that's so that we have a record of it in the minutes. If you agree.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Discussion. Not much there. John Clark raised about the plastic coverings. We adjourned. Everybody okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
So what's the date of this?
February 20th.
Okay, then, motion to approve the minutes of the February 20th, 2024 Village of Rhinebeck Planning Board meeting as amended.
I'll second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, one more. The next one was the March 5th meeting. Okay. And so here's this. I added at the beginning a reminder that Ryan reminded everybody that the March 19th was canceled because of Election Day. Here was the thing where Jeff Thurman came back, and the result was that he put a 240-volt power outlet. Now this time, yours are in blue. I can't explain this.
Did the same thing, the same
Right.
way, it just showed up.
But that's the Durbin thing. Approve that. Winnicke. Here's some things that David asked about the Winnicke sign. Approving the Longway Financial, occupying the same space. Here was the one in the Kristen Hansen, which took over the old Upstate Down sign space. And we approved that.
Plus,
Thank you.
Here's Elijah. This is the 118 Market, and I added vinyl to say that it's clear that they're removing the vinyl siding.
Right.
A couple of things that both Darren and Michael pointed out here. The sidewalk needs to repair, and to the existing front stoop is needed, and sidewalk. And determine if there is a transom window above that door, and if so, save it.
There is none. It's
Okay,
got nice new molding, it looks great.
okay. And
David Miller abstained? What, that
you
doesn't-
weren't at that meeting.
I know, that sentence doesn't make any sense though, except for David Miller, who was not at.
Yeah, well, you didn't, in other words, you didn't
I
approve
can't vote.
the January,
maybe we should say David Miller who abstained because he was not at the, whatever the date of these minutes
at
is.
that meeting.
At the March 5th meeting.
Okay.
Because it sounds like he wasn't at the meeting where he abstained.
I know. I didn't abstain when I wasn't there.
Right.
It's like fake electors.
Good point.
He was not at the March 5th meeting.
I phoned in my abstention from Cape Cod, wherever it was.
Okay.
A meeting.
Yeah, I'm getting there, I'm getting there, you know. Come on. Yes, delete that.
Do it for let's just can't cross it
Yeah,
out.
so this will all go away when I remove all the comments. So in other words,
Final.
yeah, the meeting is,
Final.
yeah, okay. Motion to approve the March 5th, 2024 Village of Rhinebeck Planning Board meeting minutes as amended.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye. Okay.
Good, we got some minutes done, great.
Motion to adjourn.
Wait a minute, Chair.
Wait, wait, wait,
Wait a minute. Whoa.
You're the one who said you need to go take a nap.
Yeah, well, we're doing pretty good. It's not even 9 o'clock yet. It's when it's 10:45, that's when things get sort of foggy. So the office, the planning board received a letter from David R. Kane, currently at 47 North Parsons Street, but also has ownership over 49 North Parsons Street, and will soon be occupying and moving into 49 North Parsons Street. The letter reads, "Dear members of the board, I'm writing to you to ask a question about a potential improvement to my property. The exterior of the property has aluminum siding on the second floor. It is the original siding. The first floor is concrete block that is covered by vinyl siding. As the property owner, I'm considering improving the appearance of the property by removing the existing siding both on the first and second floor and installing a high-quality vinyl siding that would be flat clapboard on the first floor and cedar siding like vinyl on the second floor. I have enclosed samples from Williams Lumber of what could be installed. My question to the board is, if I were to make a formal submission to the board, is this something that would be considered? Many thanks for your consideration. Sincerely, David R. Kane." And I have the examples from Williams Lumber here as well. I think this is the one to be considered on the
Not historic.
first floor. That would be the clapboard
Okay.
and the cedar siding on the second floor. So as we all know, that with the expansion of the historic overlay district, that now all of North Parsonage
It's in the district.
is part of the district now.
Well, that makes it simple, I think.
It's not allowed.
But it's a replacement of existing
In kind.
in kind, so it's not, it's a material that's not allowed, but are you allowed to replace in kind?
And,
It's not a prohibited material.
but there's there's the cinder block and then there's the aluminum.
So aluminum is on the second floor.
Yeah.
And then vinyl is on the first floor that's over the cinder block portion.
It's got a garage on the first floor. It doesn't have a first floor, really, it's a garage. And then the only thing is an apartment on the second floor. It's a very unattractive building.
Well, I think we would have to look at it.
Well, I mean, he's given, I mean,
It's
it's
like-
very unattractive, and it's plastic siding.
Plastic. It looks
I would also like to remind the board that you guys have
boiling.
encountered not essentially a residential example of this, but a commercial example of this. The gentleman who owns the one building on West Market Street,
Right.
he came in and
Yes.
he proposed a higher grade or a different quality of vinyl siding, and the board denied
That's right, we said no.
Yeah.
his request.
It's in the code.
It is a prohibited material,
It is.
both vinyl and aluminum.
Vinyl, even luxury vinyl or gold-plated aluminum, it doesn't matter, it's not. We want, the hardy board or something like that,
Right.
cement, fiber cement board or clapboards.
I did mention that to Mr. Kane, however, it seems that there might be some budget
I understand
constraints.
that.
There might be some elements where this might be a temporary situation as 47 finalizes the sale, that they might be looking to somewhere else, that this is just a temporary situation and they just want to improve something that really hasn't had any investment in it at all since they've owned it. I mean, it was previously owned by the Larkin family.
That would improve it, but unfortunately, the code doesn't allow
This is
us
allowed to.
Correct.
to do it, you know, it's like, we're sorry, yeah, we agree with you, you know, either come up with a more expensive material or,
Yeah. Or a
Approved
or a
material.
facade that's more appealing and historic looking, which would, be expense. The alternative is, it's there now and.
if he's selling the big house, he's gonna get a lot of change.
Yeah, it's
This
there
is
now.
one of our issues about, there's no budget for helping someone who doesn't have the money
Mhm.
to do it, like
Yeah.
on Market Street, lawnmower.
Yeah,
You know, it's the same
I'd like to go
problem.
look at the place. I'm not sure that whatever's there now, putting vinyl siding on it would make it look better.
No,
Yeah.
putting lipstick on a pig or something. It's not an attractive building. It's putting historic district, it's not an old building. It's got a garage, a split level with a garage downstairs and a window, and a picture window sitting, what are those, a bay picture window sticking out in front of the second floor. And
It's
I
not
mean, you might
contributing.
suggest paint, Ryan. I mean, if it's just a short-term solution, you
Yeah.
could certainly consider painting both the aluminum and the vinyl.
I can mention that to him. I will call him tomorrow and find out if a verbal response is sufficient enough, or if he wants something in writing that certainly the board can provide him,
Yeah.
and any suggestion
Yeah.
that can
It's
be
also
coupled.
like the age of the building, maybe that siding's not inappropriate for the age of that building, but our code doesn't
I
allow
don't think
it.
it's
So
a
we
very
might,
old building.
I think
Right.
Darren's suggestion is a good one.
paint it
Suggestion.
now,
And
negotiate.
the alternative would be, well, then you have to come in and talk to us. And if you do, you'll be subject to the historic district code.
For now,
But there's
until
nothing
those regs
preventing you
change.
from painting it if you wanted to make what's there look better. I think that's a good solution for him, for now.
But just back up a minute though, because this is a recently, this parcel itself is, because it recently got dragged in, it was previously not part of the historic district. So this is a new addition to the,
Whole block was not part of it.
right, so
And
now it is.
But the building that they're enhancing is a more attractive building. This one is not, I don't think it's that old, I don't know the date of it, but it's not attractive. It was, it's got the
No, I know.
garage.
Yeah. But I'm following the logic that we've used elsewhere on plat recently, where we said, we just don't have the right tools for the post-1970s stuff. And I gotta go back to that letter from David Gordon, who said chapter 64 applies with respect to demolition, but we don't necessarily have anything in our code to regulate these buildings. Right, remember this issue from some of the applications on Platt Avenue, where we had say over demolition, but we didn't have say over what they did with the building after the fact?
Right, because the board hadn't voted on it yet.
Right, but the truth is, we do have the code. It's in the historic district now. And again, I think you're.
No, I know it says that in the code, but
Yeah,
I'm just.
he's
I'm
not
wondering-
suggesting demolition, he's suggesting re-siding.
Right, but I am getting at the newly added properties into the historic district, we were told we could handle differently.
That was because it was a transition point.
But now that the board has voted that in, that no
I
longer
didn't
applies,
think
so
it was
now
part
it's,
of the district.
so he missed that magic window
Missed it by
Just like,
Yeah, that
a
went on
year
the
and a
board.
half.
by a year and a half, okay.
Yeah, they came to us before the law was enacted.
Right, so it was the enactment of the law that put them now in these.
and now she is in the historic district, and she's with Warren tonight, and she has to follow these rules for building, as the next floor
Yeah.
buildings will have to do.
No, I just want to
Any
make sure we
building-
weren't acting inconsistently, but yeah, the fact that it's recently been added officially all the way makes them subject to this.
It was some years ago, when somebody wanted to do something in the historic district, that build a house, renovate a house, and it wasn't clear, so we went to the village board, had them change the code to say that we had purview over any new construction anywhere in the historic district, even if it was not, a vacant lot, which there are very few of, but people are subdividing and trying to squeeze every lot they can get, just like they are, because that land is valuable to build a house. Right in the
Anything
center of
else?
the village.
You
No,
want to set up a date for
Do you
a
mind
site
if I
visit?
just take some pictures? I'm from the Daily Catch.
Oh,
Nice to
okay,
meet
sure.
you. Andrew's out sick tonight, and I just want to get some
Okay,
nice
okay.
photos.
Yeah.
Pretend I'm not here.
Two other,
Sit up
All
straight
these
and
handsome
look professional.
gentlemen with their mustaches.
And
And
kids.
Actually, you all
We got-
do. You all
we gotta
have.
get you to,
I think I gotta go over it a little more.
a little
Oh,
girl
that's
that's
scruffy.
It's just nice to get a few photos. Oh, you're gonna,
Now we're posing, we're not supposed to.
you're posing, and I didn't want you to
So-
pose.
Yeah.
Two other quick things. One is,
Sorry.
with
Your
respect
face.
to David's comment about public hearings and running long, should we just consider putting in the agenda at the end that the meeting ends at a certain time, which I understand to be perfectly allowable in a lot of planning boards. I was on a,
the town planning board, you go to
Yeah.
the agenda, but the town planning board says, this applicant will be on from 6:17 until 6:24.
Yeah, it's
I said, that's like pretty tight. No, but I think the way we did the hospital was we controlled it that it was 3 minutes per person.
no, that's all good. I think, I was on a training 2 weeks ago, and a couple of the planning boards down South County were talking about this issue, and they, their point was that, at 11 o'clock at night, they're not making good
Right,
decisions.
yeah.
And the attorney who was leading the training had
Uh-huh.
suggested that they could simply put in their meeting minutes that the meeting closes at 10 PM, and whatever application is in process at 10 PM is the final application, and the meeting will end after that.
Right,
Or,
right.
that it'll end abruptly at 10 PM or something, 11 PM. And the suggestion was, nobody's making big decisions at that point in the evening, and it was just a way to sort of, just like gracefully say, okay, well, we've made everyone aware, so everyone should be
And
surprised.
it's so along those lines, is that an option to just say, we've been talking on this one topic for an hour and a half now. The meeting is at an end, and we'll pick up where we left off at the next meeting
Right.
on this
The
application.
next speaker in line will continue at the next meeting.
That's a great idea.
I'm just throwing it out there as
Yeah.
if we think it's going to go there, why not
Because
preemptively
the
for
hospital,
any meeting?
when I said I want 3 minutes per person, we'll have, a stopwatch, but your time's up. And if you're going, if Charlie already said it,
Good
I
night.
don't need anything.
Nice to meet
I
you.
agree with Charlie. We had a sign-in sheet that they would say, okay, cool. Ryan would then say, okay, John Smith, you're up.
Yep.
You got 3 minutes. And then, you could just get up and say, I agree with what Bob said,
Yeah, well, I think they go hand in hand, or they
you
can be
know,
individual.
to make it move quicker.
Especially with the current application, which promises to be time consuming.
If we have two, and I do not want to say, okay, on the 4th Tuesday of the month, we're going to have a special meeting, like the village board does sometimes, just handle this one applicant. I don't, I think we want to try to fit it in, the schedule's been pretty light lately, and hopefully it continues that way. And in July, as I said, July and August, I'm concerned about a lot of people being out of town.
Speaking of that, that was my other thing, is that I just found out I cannot be here on July 18th.
Oh, no.
John's back.
16.
16th, but John is back and I am not able to be
Oh,
here.
okay.
So
Okay.
it shouldn't be a quorum issue, but whatever we're in the process of, just to make everybody aware of that.
It's,
Okay.
it's.
I'll say it again. Anything else?
I'll make a motion
No, do
to,
we want to make a date to,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
We got distracted.
We can do that off channel for the site visit.
All right,
We-
circulate.
That doesn't need to be on.
we'll
the-
circulate it around,
Okay.
and we'll find the time next
In
week.
that case, motion to adjourn.
second?
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.